By 1989, horror had splintered into countless directions. While the big franchises kept rolling out sequels, a quieter wave of films was experimenting with new settings, fresh ideas, and plenty of blood-soaked creativity. This was a year where slashers left the summer camp behind for supermarkets and high schools, where Italian Gothic horror embraced elaborate spectacle, and where bizarre dreamscapes collided with post-apocalyptic monsters. Rental shelves were packed with titles that didn't make headlines but left lasting impressions on anyone brave enough to pick them up. Tonight, we're stepping into 1989, exploring 10 overlooked horror films that prove the end of the decade was just as daring and just as twisted as the beginning. After midnight, 1989, college students sign up for a course on the psychology of fear, but their eccentric professor has a unique teaching style. He doesn't want essays, he wants his class to experience terror firsthand. What begins as unsettling demonstration soon spirals into something darker, as the professor challenges his students to confront fear in all its forms. Directed by Jim and Ken Wheat, After Midnight stands out as a horror anthology framed by this classroom experiment. The film delivers 3 separate tales, each exploring a different flavor of fear. From a nightmarish encounter with violent strangers to supernatural forces to a stalker's deadly obsession. The wraparound story keeps the tension alive, blurring the line between lesson and life-or-death ordeal. The cast features Gillian McWhirter, Pamela Adlon, and Marg Helgenberger, who would later go on to long careers in film and television. Each segment lets them show different sides of horror, from raw panic to psychological dread. The stories themselves mix familiar tropes with stylish execution. A deserted gas station under siege, a seemingly normal date night that takes a sharp turn, and a finale that plunges into supernatural territory. The film's pacing shifts with each chapter, keeping the audience on edge as it asks the same question the professor poses to his students. How far can fear push you? While After Midnight never gained the same recognition as bigger anthologies like Creepshow, it carves its own niche with a late 80s energy and a willingness to jump between tones. It's uneven, but that unpredictability becomes part of its charm. At its best, After Midnight is a reminder that horror comes in many shapes, and sometimes the scariest part is not knowing what's waiting for you in the next story. The Terror Within, 1989. In a post-apocalyptic future, humanity has been nearly wiped out by a plague that left behind a new race of grotesque mutants. The survivors, holed up in an underground laboratory, struggle to keep their fragile community alive. But when one of the creatures breaches their defenses, the group faces a nightmare. A relentless monster, with the strength to tear them apart and a terrifying ability to reproduce. Directed by Thierry Knotts and produced by Roger Corman, The Terror Within carries the unmistakable stamp of Corman's late 80s sci-fi horror output. Low budget, high concept, and packed with creature effects. George Kennedy lends his presence as the group's leader, while Andrew Stevens and Star Andref anchor the cast as survivors forced to confront both the monster and their own desperation. The film's atmosphere is claustrophobic, with long stretches in the sterile underground halls giving way to sudden bursts of gore and violence. The creature design, though clearly working within budget constraints, delivers the kind of rubber suit menace that defined an era of video store horror. What keeps The Terror Within interesting is its mix of sci-fi themes with exploitation-style intensity. It echoes Alien in its setup, isolated survivors versus a deadly creature, but filters that concept through the Corman lens, emphasizing blood, suspense, and pulpy energy over polish. While it didn't make waves on release, The Terror Within found its audience on VHS shelves, where its monster imagery and post-apocalyptic setting stood out. It's a rough gem from 1989, proof that even on a shoestring budget, horror and sci-fi can merge into something memorable. Intruder, 1989. It's closing time at a small-town supermarket, but for the overnight stock crew, the night is just beginning, and it won't end well. As they restock shelves and prepare for the next day, a mysterious killer lurks in the aisles, turning the store into a bloody hunting ground. One by one, employees are picked off in increasingly gruesome fashion, leaving only a few to fight for survival. Directed by Scott Spiegel, Intruder is a late 80s slasher that has earned a reputation for its inventive kills and wild camera work. The cast features Elizabeth Cox as the lead, alongside appearances from Renee Estevez, Dan Hicks, and even cult icons Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi in small but memorable roles. What makes Intruder unforgettable are its set pieces. Spiegel and his crew find creative ways to turn everyday supermarket equipment into instruments of carnage. Box bailers, meat slicers, and power saws are all used to horrifying effect. The gore, handled by KNB-EFX Group in one of their early projects, is over-the-top and practical, cementing the film as a splatter classic. Visually, the film is stylish and experimental, with Spiegel using extreme camera angles, POV shots, and clever edits that give the slasher formula fresh energy. It's both brutal and playful, a mix that makes the mayhem oddly entertaining. Though modest in scope, Intruder thrives as a VHS-era favorite, delivering everything slasher fans crave: a tight setting, memorable kills, and just enough camp to balance out the horror. It's proof that sometimes the most ordinary places can hide the deadliest nightmares. The Church, also known as La Chiesa, 1989. Centuries ago, a mass execution of supposed witches left their bodies buried beneath a cathedral. In the present day, restorers uncover the site, unknowingly unleashing the evil that was sealed away. As the cathedral's heavy doors mysteriously lock, priests, scholars, and tourists are trapped inside, forced to confront visions, possessions, and a demonic force determined to reclaim their souls. Directed by Michele Soavi and produced by Dario Argento, The Church is a standout example of Italian Gothic horror in the late 80s. It features a cast that includes Asia Argento in one of her early roles, Thomas Arana as the archaeologist, and Hugh Quarshie as a priest struggling to contain the chaos. Their performances anchor the film as the surreal nightmare unfolds. The visuals are the film's greatest strength. Soavi fills the cathedral with shadowy corridors, grand stained glass windows, and cavernous spaces that seem alive with menace. Practical effects deliver grotesque transformations and hallucinations, blending religious imagery with graphic horror. The result is part haunted house, part apocalyptic vision. Adding to the atmosphere is the unforgettable soundtrack. A mix of compositions by Keith Emerson, Philip Glass, and Goblin gives the film a soundscape that's eerie, powerful, and sometimes otherworldly. The music turns the cathedral into its own character, oppressive, mysterious, and terrifying. While often overshadowed by Dario Argento's more famous works, The Church stands tall as Soavi's vision of Gothic dread. It's operatic, visually stunning, and filled with moments that linger long after the credits. For fans of Italian horror, The Church is a reminder that the late 80s still had the power to conjure something grand, grotesque, and unforgettable. Madman, 1989. Virginia, a young bookstore clerk with a passion for pulp horror novels, discovers a chilling new favorite, a rare book about a deranged, disfigured killer obsessed with a woman who doesn't love him. But as she turns the pages, the line between fiction and reality blurs. Soon, the novel's villain steps out of the story and into her life, leaving behind a trail of murders that echo the book's gruesome plot. Directed by Tibor Takac, best known for The Gate, Madman is a clever blend of slasher and supernatural horror with a metafictional twist. Jenny Wright stars as Virginia, giving the character both vulnerability and strength as she battles a killer pulled straight from the pages. Clayton Rohner plays her skeptical boyfriend, while Randall William Cook, also part of the film's effects team, portrays the monstrous stalker with unnerving presence. The film thrives on atmosphere. Dimly lit apartments, cluttered bookstores, and shadowy streets that echo with menace. The murders are staged with a mix of gothic flair and inventive gore, while the killer's grotesque, self-mutilated appearance adds a memorable layer of unease. What sets Madman apart is its concept, horror that literally comes alive through storytelling. It plays with themes of obsession, imagination, and the dangers of escapism, all while delivering satisfying genre thrills. Though it never reached mainstream recognition, Madman has become a cult favorite for horror fans who love clever spins on familiar tropes. It's both a love letter to Pulp Fiction and a chilling reminder that sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that refuse to stay on the page. Nightwish, 1989. A group of graduate students studying parapsychology head to a remote mansion for a weekend experiment in fear. Led by their eccentric professor, they're tasked with confronting nightmares and testing the boundaries of reality. But what begins as an exercise in the supernatural soon turns into a descent into madness, as shifting dimensions, grotesque visions, and alien terrors rip apart their understanding of what's real. Directed by Bruce R. Cook, Nightwish is a late 80s curiosity that blends supernatural horror, science fiction, and surreal imagery. The cast includes Elizabeth Kai Tan, known from Friday the 13th, Part 7 and Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, Brian Thompson as the imposing and unpredictable professor, and Alicia Das as one of the students pulled into the nightmare. The film thrives on atmosphere and unpredictability. One moment the group is debating the nature of dreams. The next, they're plunged into bizarre set pieces filled with slimy creatures, shifting realities, and shocking violence. Practical effects bring to life everything from goo-covered monsters to otherworldly landscapes, giving the movie a hallucinatory feel. What makes Nightwish stand out is its willingness to abandon linear storytelling in favor of a fever dream. It's messy, but in that chaos comes a strange appeal, a patchwork of nightmares that feel ripped from both sci-fi pulp and exploitation horror. Though not widely known, Nightwish has carved out a place as a cult oddity. It's a film that asks its characters and its audience to question what's real, and then gleefully refuses to give a straight answer. The Dead Pit, 1989. A young woman with amnesia arrives at a mental hospital to begin her accommodation, only to discover the institution hides a dark past. Years earlier, a deranged surgeon was conducting gruesome experiments in the hospital's basement until he was stopped and entombed in his own dead pit. But evil doesn't stay buried forever, and soon the asylum becomes overrun with the reanimated victims of his work. Directed by Brett Leonard, The Dead Pit is a low-budget gem that leans into gothic atmosphere and outrageous effects. Cheryl Lawson stars as Jane Doe, the newcomer whose curiosity uncovers the pit's secrets, while Jeremy Slate and Stephen Gregory bring grit and menace to their supporting roles. The film's strongest draw is its imagery. Blood-drenched corridors, stark white hallways filled with screaming patients, and a basement overrun with the undead. The gore is plentiful, with practical effects delivering slime, rot, and violent reanimation sequences that push the limits of its budget. Adding to its cult status is the VHS release itself. The original video box had a 3D glow-in-the-dark zombie head that made it a rental store standout in the late 80s. For many collectors, that packaging became as iconic as the film. While not a critical success, The Dead Pit thrives as a piece of video store history. A wild mix of medical horror, zombie mayhem, and over-the-top visuals. It's the kind of movie that may not scare you straight, but it will stick with you for its sheer commitment to being eerie, gory, and unapologetically strange. Psycho Cop, 1989. 6 friends head out to a remote cabin for a carefree getaway. But their plans are cut short by the arrival of Officer Joe Vickers, a cop with a badge, a gun, and a taste for murder. What looks like a routine camping trip quickly turns into a fight for survival, as the deranged policeman begins stalking the group one by one, leaving behind grisly scenes and darkly comic one-liners. Directed by Wallace Potts, Psycho Cop takes the slasher formula and gives it a wicked twist by making the killer an authority figure. Robert R. Schaefer steals the show as Officer Vickers, playing the role with over-the-top menace and campy charm. His presence turns the film from a straightforward slasher into something both violent and darkly humorous. The kills are bloody and creative, with everyday objects and police gear twisted into instruments of terror. The remote forest setting adds to the tension, giving the film that classic cabin in the woods feel, while the villain's police persona brings an unsettling sense of inescapable authority. What makes Psycho Cop memorable is its tone. It doesn't just lean into horror, it winks at the audience while doing it. The film isn't polished, but it's unapologetically entertaining, with Schaefer's performance anchoring it as a cult favorite among slasher fans. While it never gained mainstream traction, Psycho Cop lives on as one of the more outrageous slasher oddities of the 80s. It proves that sometimes the scariest thing isn't the masked killer in the shadows. It's the smiling officer in uniform, ready to write you a ticket you won't survive. Nightmare Beach, 1989. Spring break in Florida promises sun, parties, and freedom. But this year, it also brings death. As thousands of college students flood the beaches, a mysterious biker in a black helmet begins terrorizing the crowd, leaving bodies electrocuted in his wake. Rumors spread that the killer is the vengeful ghost of a gang leader executed in the electric chair, returned to settle scores during the wildest week of the year. Directed by Umberto Lenzi, though often credited to Harry Kirkpatrick, Nightmare Beach is a blend of slasher mayhem and sleazy spring break atmosphere. Nicholas DeToth and Sarah Buxton star as vacationers caught in the chaos, while John Saxon and Michael Parks lend genre credibility as lawmen trying to stop the bloodshed. The kills are what make the film stand out. The masked biker uses his motorcycle as both a weapon and a stage for executions, turning the already chaotic party scene into a carnival of danger. The mix of neon lights, pulsing music, and crowded beaches creates a backdrop that feels both festive and sinister. Part slasher, part biker revenge flick, the film leans heavily into its setting. Beer-fueled concerts, rowdy bars, and sun-drenched streets filled with oblivious partiers. It's a snapshot of late 80s excess colliding with horror, and the result is as bizarre as it is entertaining. Nightmare Beach never reached the heights of bigger slashers, but it's a cult favorite for its mix of camp, energy, and wild kills. For fans of offbeat horror, it's a reminder that sometimes the scariest thing at spring break isn't the hangover. It's who's waiting for you on the open road. Cutting Class, 1989. High school should be all about exams, sports, and social drama, but in this twisted slice of late 80s horror, it's about survival. After serving time in a mental institution, troubled student Brian Woods returns to campus, and almost immediately the bodies start piling up. Is he responsible, or is someone else hiding behind the mask of normal teenage life? Directed by Rospo Pallenberg, Cutting Class mixes slasher conventions with a streak of black comedy. The film is perhaps best remembered for featuring a young Brad Pitt in one of his earliest roles, playing the clean-cut basketball player caught in the chaos. Jill Sholin, already a familiar face to horror fans from The Stepfather and Popcorn, stars as Paula, the final girl forced to unravel the mystery. Donovan Leitch rounds out the trio as Brian, the troubled classmate whose dark past casts suspicion over everything. The setting leans into classic slasher territory. Locker rooms, hallways, empty classrooms, and after-hours corridors become hunting grounds. Kill sequences are staged with a mix of camp and creativity. Lawn equipment, chemistry labs, and even the school mascot's suit are put to gruesome use. What gives Cutting Class its lasting cult appeal is the way it balances tongue-in-cheek humor with genuine tension. It knows the slasher formula well enough to play it straight, while also poking fun at high school stereotypes. Though it never reached the heights of the genre's classics, Cutting Class survives as a late 80s curiosity. A time capsule of teen horror where paranoia, camp, and early star power combine into something oddly unforgettable. And that wraps up 1989, a reminder that horror's late 80s output was about far more than the familiar franchises. From cult slashers to surreal oddities, these films show how diverse and unpredictable the genre had become by the end of the decade. They may not have topped the box office, but they live on through their atmosphere, their audacity, and the imaginations of the fans who still track them down today. For even more VHS-era discoveries, visit our online physical media store at ejectvhs.com And remember, always be kind and rewind. Because every movie is someone's favorite.